Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make your own custom braids. I'm going to show you how you can get your braids to start where you want it to start. With the knowledge that you're going to be able to gain here, you're going to be able to create pigtail braids, rope braids, really any part of the hair you want to go. It's fully customized. This is the difference between this video and other videos out there, is you're going to be able to shape out your braids exactly how you want it. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that you have a hair mesh here. So what I did is I just duplicated some of the faces here that I could use as a hair mesh scalp. And of course, it has to have UVs for this to work. And then you're going to go ahead and Shift A and go to curve, and you need to create an empty hair. And once you have an empty hair, you could go to your sculpt mode and you're going to be able to see your hairbrush tools here. You have to add hair. You could delete some hair. You could comb and style it. The very main brushes that I use here is the add. To add the hair, I also use the comb. Those are the main two brushes that I use. Now, I have a complete video on how to get started with Blender hair. Learn Blender's hair new system. I suggest that you look at this if you have never created hair before. So if you want to create just the basic hair, maybe just any straight hair, if you don't know how to add hair yet, then I suggest you go check out that video. Alright, so now that you have your basic shape of your hair laid out, basically, it's the way how you want your braids to be flowing. So I know that I want my braids to kind of go in this direction, right? So that's why I have it set up this way. I combed and styled my hair that way. If you want your braids to go in this direction, then you have to style your hair to comb the straight hair going in that particular direction, okay? So this is exactly how I want it. And the way we're going to do it is we are going to do just one part of the hair first. And then later we're going to be creating some nodes to be able to duplicate the braids on the other side, because we are going to be making some pigtails for Wednesday's hair. So I'm going to go to sculpt mode and I'm going to turn off my symmetry. And then I'm going to go to delete. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete this side. Okay, good. Alright, now we could go to our node here, our node editor, and here we are going to be adding our braid hair curves node. So let's go and Shift A, search, and let's just type in braids, and you're gonna find the braid hair curves. And yeah, go ahead and just plug that in there, and you're gonna see something like this. It's not looking like it's braided. It's trying to look like it's trying to braid the hair, but we gotta go ahead and mess around with the settings here, okay? So first things first, for the setting, you see the guide distance here. I generally leave this at 0 if you wanted the braids of the hair to follow the direction of what you had. Set it to 0. And also for the mask, set it to 0. So I find by setting this to 0, the guide distance, and the guide mask, it follows more the curves of the hair initially, the way you initially had your hair combed and styled, okay? So 0 for guide distance, guide mask, 0. Next thing is going to be for the subdivision. The subdivision, the higher the values that you have here, the more you're going to have some points that will be added here on your curves for your hair. And we don't want it that high because later on we are going to be smoothing some parts of the hair here. At the same time, you don't want it too low, because if it's too low, it's not going to give us the detail for the braids that we want, okay? So we want it slightly higher. So I'm going to go and set this to 2. Alright, and another thing is for the braid start, we had it at 0.1. So we want to think about where we want the braid to start. And while I'm doing this also, I noticed that it's not, there's some parts of the hair that's just straight and some parts that it looks like it's trying to be braided. What we need to do to address that, we need to Control Tab, and let's just go to object mode. There you go. If you go to object mode, you could see while you're adjusting the braid nodes here, everything is taking effect based on the values that you set here, okay? So object mode, very important. Okay, so now for the braid start, we could crank it up or crank it down. You could hold the shift key on your keyboard and then just drag your mouse to slowly crank it up or crank it down. So this is where you want the braid to start. I think I wanted to start at about, I think 0.5. So I wanted to kind of start like right below the ear area, around the area. And the more we add more settings here and adjust it, the more we will see the effect of the braids, and then we could go back to the braid start. We could always go back to the properties here. It doesn't have to be set in stone. Okay, and for the radius, this is going to be how thick the overall shape of the braid is going to be. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0.012. You could mess around with your braids with the radius to see exactly what you want. I might go back to the radius later, might be a little too thin, but yeah, for now I'll set it to that. And for the shape, let's go and just leave it as is. This is when you want to keep the radius of the shape consistent all throughout the braids, and I usually just keep it the same value. So I'm just going to set it as is. For the factor minimum and the factor maximum, if you set this factor minimum to a higher value here, it will make the part of the braids here larger. And if you go to factor maximum, you crank this up. So the factor maximum here will make this part of the braids wider, larger, and the factor minimum will make this part of the braids wider and larger. So mess around with that to get what you want. I'm gonna set this to 0.9, and then the factor maximum I'm gonna set to 1.1. Alright, so I don't want too much of a large gap between the two, so I want it to be perfect, almost perfectly straight down. I don't want it to taper or anything. So if you want yours to taper, then you have to kind of mess around with the factor minimum and the factor maximum. And the frequency is how often the braids is going to be repeating. I think the default right now is actually kind of looking good. It's kind of like the way I want it. But once again, you could always mess around with it. Hold shift and drag your mouse to mess around with this. Maybe sometimes you have to look at your character from afar to see exactly what you want, how you want the braids to be. So maybe something like that. So I have it at 1.15, and I think for the braid start, I could further mess around with this. So let's see here, maybe add a little bit more braided part right here. I think that would be fine. So a little bit more braided going on there. Yeah, I think that's cool. I think depending on the picture that I'm looking at, there are some parts of Wednesday where her hair is slightly messy, so she loses some of the effect of the braids at the beginning, and then you get more braid at the bottom. And another thing that I want to go ahead and mess around with is going to be the thickness. So the thickness, I have it at 1. So if I set this to lower value, let's see, I'm going to go and mess around with this. So once again, this is going to be the thickness of the shape of the braid. So if you crank this all the way up, you can see that it gets wider. If you crank this up, it will get wider in this direction. All right, so you can see the thickness here. The first thickness makes it wider from the front, and then the second thickness here makes it wider when you look at the side view. So I think for this one, I'm going to set it to 0.7. Yeah, 0.7, and then thickness here, I'm going to set it to 0.6. Ooh, I think I could kind of mess around with this. Maybe I could hold shift and then just make this part a little slightly thicker in this view. Not too much. Something like that. And then from this view, okay, so from this view, maybe, yeah, I think this would be fine. I don't want it too thick, not too thick. Yeah, I think something like that will work. Yeah, I think the thickness is fine now. Now the shape assy right here, this is how asymmetric you want the braids to be. If you want to have a little bit asymmetrical form there, you can, so it's not fully uniform. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this maybe 0.2, just to add a little bit asymmetrical shape there. Now for the last parts here for the flare length and the flare open. So if you guys look at Wednesday's hair here, we have this part here where it's not braided. So this part is braided right here, and then right here there's some flare opening there. So I think I am going to create something like that, and by adjusting the flare length and the flare opening. So I'm gonna set this flare length to 0.05. This is how long I want the flare to be, and the opening is how wide you want this bottom part to be. So if you go ahead and crank the flare opening up, you could see that you could open that up, the flare opening. And I think I'm gonna set it to maybe 0.01. And later on, we could go back and adjust this and just comb it down if we need to. Maybe for the flare opening, I could even make it flare length. I could make it slightly longer, something like that. Maybe even 0.06. There you go. And maybe I could comb it later on. Yeah, so I think looking at this here, I think this is a good start right there. We see a little baldness here, but later on we are going to puff this up. Later on, to fix this area, we're going to be going to our sculpt mode, and we're going to be using the puff brush to puff this out, okay? But yeah, right now, we could go back to object mode. It's looking kind of funky there, but what we need to do is we actually need to go ahead and duplicate the braids on the other side. And I think before we do that, we could go ahead and add the color for the hair. So for my bangs here, I already have a color there called Black Hair Matte. I use the hair BSDF, as you can see here, Surface Hair BSDF. And I'm going to use that same one for the braided hair here. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the Braid Hair Matte. And I could go ahead and just kind of test this out just so I could see how the hair is looking like, the thickness and the color. Right now it's just pure black, but later on it's best to add a little bit of variance of color to the braid, to the overall hair, because nobody's hair is pure black. Maybe you could add a little brownish or white color on there, a bluish tint. But okay, so I think that for this here, I think that I could bring down the thickness of the hair. I think it's too thick. Each individual strand is just a little too thick. So I'm gonna go to my multiply here, and right now it's set to 0.0003. I'm gonna set it to 0.0002 instead. All right, and let me see how that looks like. Okay, so yeah, I think that's better. And let me go look at the other parts here. Okay, and I think I kind of don't like some of these parts here. It looks like there's some thinning going on there, but I think we just need to add more hair strands. So we definitely need to add more hair strands here. So what we could do is we could still go back to our sculpt mode. We could go over here, go to sculpt mode, and we could go to selection paint, and we can go ahead and Alt A, so it deselects everything. And then we go to the airbrush and add a bit more hair here. And for this, I'm gonna set to length, shape turn on, and yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and also set it to point count. So whatever value that we have for the length and the shape and the point count for all these strands is gonna be the same thing for the ones that we are going to be adding right now. I'm gonna go ahead and just add some more here, especially the bald part area. Actually, I think it's best for us, whenever you're adding more hair, it's best to start at the bottom and then make your way at the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some more here, this area. So just going around, going to all of these. As you go to the top, you might have a little issue. You might not see the hair, but you could always go to puff and just make it puffy, and then you'll see it pop out. So I'm gonna go back and add some here, add some right there, right on the side. We need some more on the side here. And also going all around here, all around right there. And as I mentioned before, you might not be able to see it. Go to puff, and yeah, just make this puffy. Add some puffiness to here. And I think I'm gonna have to add more around this area at the top. I think I kind of added a little too much on this side, so I think there's gonna be some overlapping. So I'm gonna go to the delete and maybe delete some parts here. Alright, now to be able to see the new hair be braided, you go to object mode again and you will see that it has definitely been braided. Alright, cool. Now to be able for us to see, we are going to have to add, let's go ahead and add the join geometry node. That way we could duplicate what we have on this side and put it on the other side. We could duplicate our braids by going Shift A, and let's go ahead and add a join geometry node. And then we are also going to be adding a transform geometry node. And then make sure you plug in the braid curves, hair curves onto the join geometry. And then for the transform geometry, we do need to duplicate this and flip it on the other side. So we have to go to scale x -1. So let's go ahead and set this to -1. All right, so we got it on both sides. It might look a little odd with not seeing any hair here, but what we're gonna be doing is we are going to be collapsing our modifier here, and then we're going to be adjusting the hair here with our sculpting hair tools. Now, before I go ahead and just collapse the surface deform modifier here, I'm going to go back and re-render this just to see that everything for the braid part is good. I'm going to Control B and then just render this region here. And it's a little dark. I'm going to select the braids, go to my black material, and I'm going to change the color to something lighter so you can see a little bit more. You can see that there's some individual hair strands, and I don't like the individual hair strands. That you can see that there's like a gap on the hair. So I want to go and mess around with the braid hair curves here. I'm going to go back to my solid viewport shading here. And to fix that, we could go to our radius and kind of tighten the radius of this. I'm going to set it to a lower value, 0.009. Okay, so now you can see it's more together, but then it gets like really thin, the braids. So this is where we have to go back to some of our values here. So when you bring down the radius and you want to make the shape of the braid thicker, you could go to the factor min and factor max. I'm going to set this to 1.2 and 1.2. Actually, let me see, 1.1. Yeah, let's try that. Let me go and re-render. All right, and let me see if I can get it to 1. All right, I think this is looking better. Maybe for the shape asymmetry here, could also mess around with that. Maybe I could set it to 0. Set it to 0.8, 0.5. Okay, so that's better. You could see that there's a little bit more, there's some hair strands there that you could see, but it's not overkill. So it gives a little variance to the hair, which is fine. And let me look from this view. Okay, so yeah, that's definitely better. Maybe, I think that should be thick enough for the braid part. If you still don't think it's thick enough, you could always go back to the thickness. Maybe I could say to 0.8. So it gets thicker from the front view. Another thing that you might want to do is kind of mess around with the positioning of the hair. You can see that the hair is kind of lifted off from her body. So I could go back to my sculpt mode and I could go ahead and make sure everything's selected. Press A. So everything's selected and you could see that everything is modifiable. We could go to our styling, combing. We could comb this down. So I know I want it down more on her body, so I could go ahead and comb it closer to her body. That, and this closer to her face. And you could see as I'm doing this side is changing the way this is interacting with the character. You can see now it's closer to the body. So as you make changes to the hair here, you could already see the effect of it on the braid area. So very cool how you're able to do that. And I could go ahead and further move this back. You could see what's happening there. And I think this is a little too close now, sinking in too much. Alright, something like that. And I'm gonna move this down. Alright, I think that's looking good. Maybe a little bit more closer to the body. Alright, and I think I'm gonna go back to object mode, and I could go to my factor. It takes a lot of tweaking around, so I think I want to go to my factor, and I think I do want to make this thicker. So maybe in the factor min, I could factor max, I could crank it up. Yeah, just make it overall thicker. Yeah, I think something like this, thickness like that will work. Yeah, so I just made it overall thicker from the top here, and as it goes down, so it gets a little thinner. And last but not least, I want to let you all know that you could always go back to your hair here and add some geometry nodes again if you want to adjust the hair thickness when you want to. So in this case, I have my set curve radius, and I adjust the radius by adding a multiply here and a color ramp. So if I go ahead and set this to a higher value, so if I set it to 0.1, you could see I could still go back and change the hair thickness anytime I want. Okay, and if you want to go ahead and add some extra nodes here, let's say you want to add some noise in the hair, if you want to add some freeze on the hair, you could always go back and add some more of these nodes and just connect them all. So let's say I could add some freeze hair curves here, plug that in there, and I could set the factor to a lower value. I set it to 0.1, and you could see the freeze hair effects on there. You can tell it's starting to get freezy in that area. But yeah, you could always go back and adjust the braids even though you have collapsed the modifier. Alright, so once you are happy with the way your braids look, what we could do to fix this area here, we could select our hair, and we could go to our modifier, and we could collapse everything that we have done here for our node. So collapsing the surface deform, apply, and then we could go to our sculpt mode for our braids, and we could manipulate this the way we want it. Now we have to turn on symmetry, so we are doing both sides at the same time. We want to be able to just manipulate this certain area. We want to puff this out because it's sinking in, and the areas here for the braids, we are happy the way it is, so we don't want to touch that. And to be able to do that, we need to go use our selection paint and set it to control points. That way you're only able to select certain areas of the hair that you want to manipulate. Alt-A on your keyboard. So that basically selects none. So when you see that the hair is dark, that means it's masked out. You're not able to paint it at all. You're not able to manipulate it. So now with our selection paint, with our control point, hold shift and start painting in this area. And the areas that you're going to be able to manipulate are going to be colored white. So hold shift and just start painting that area that you know you want to change up and you want to puff out. Making sure that I'm only selecting the ones that I truly want to select. You might want to bring down your brush size if needed. Alright, so once that's all good, we could go to our puff brush here. We could bring down the strength slightly, and when I'm puffing, or even creating new hair, I do like to start at the bottom and make my way up to the top. So we can like puff this out. At this point, I do like to press A to make everything selectable. Now I'm able to paint every part of the hair. You can see everything's white. So I'm just smoothing this out. I do like to just go ahead and just smooth this entire thing. When you smooth it, you're gonna notice that it's starting to sink in, but you could always go back and puff it right back out. The most important thing is making sure that this area is smooth. All right, and then I'm gonna go back to my selection paint, Alt A, and then I'm gonna go ahead and once again do the same thing that we did before. Yeah, you might have to do this more than once, which is perfectly fine, just so that we could have something nice and smooth here. All right, and then go to the puff, and once again, just buff out the area. Buff out this area. Do some puffing here also. I'm puffing on this area and here. All right. Okay. And then we could go ahead and press A. Cool. And if you see that there's some parts here that there's still some gap, we could go to the pinch brush and use the pinch brush to just kind of bring them together. I'm going to bring down the strength for the pinch brush, and if you pinch them, you could see that they start to stick together a bit more. If you see some gaps there, that's one way to fix it. There are different ways to fix this because you don't want to add too much hair here, especially if you don't have too much of a powerful system. So something like this is something that you could do. All right, and also we could go to our comb brush, and I'm going to manipulate this part right here because the ear is being covered. Just make that puffed out and maybe puff this out slightly. So I'm gonna give a little bit volume here and a little bit more volume this area. There you go. Just add more volume to her hair. Look in this view. I think from this view, I like that there's a little break up there going. And I'm gonna do a little smoothing around this area, just kind of smooth it so it doesn't look like it's, all right, something like that. And maybe I think overall this part here could be slightly puffy, so I could kind of comb that to make it go up slightly. All right, now I want to see how it kind of looks like when I render. I'm gonna go the space bar. Oops, I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna go and hide the brow hair and hide the hair mesh. Okay, gonna go to my camera view, and what I could do is I'm gonna go to my camera. All right, so I'm gonna do a little test render, see what we're working with. All right, so as you can see here, there's a little bit of the skin showing, and I don't want to have to add too much hair here. So what I could do is I could just make the scalp black, and that would blend in nicely. You would barely even see it, but if you want to take more time on it, you could go ahead and add some more individual hair strands if you like. But yeah, in my case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and select my character here, all right, and Shift H, and I'm gonna go to my side view here, hit the tab key, and we could go ahead and Shift Z, and we could go ahead and select portion of the head area here that we want to be pure black. Well, not really pure black. We want it the same, about the same color as our hair, all right? All right, something like that. And yeah, something like that. And then we could go to our material. Yeah, I'm gonna go to my material here, and then could create a brand new material, and I'm gonna call this black color scalp. All right, and then we could, with this selected here, with our mesh selected, we could click on assign right here, assign, and then you turn it into white because for the base color we have white right here. So we could just change that to the color of the hair, which is going to be more, I guess, black, but we could change it into the type of color that we need. We could adjust it further, but right now I'm going to go ahead and set it to black color. I'm going to go to HEX, copy that same color code, and I'm going to put it on the viewport display here, HEX. There you go. And also for this one, we really do not want any shine, because otherwise if there's shine to the material, it's still gonna look like there's something underneath the hair. So we want to get rid of the shininess there. We go to our material preview here, and you can see just how shiny that is, right? So we could go to our specular and just bring down the specular all the way to 0. And I don't have any specular from the 0, so everything is just pure colors what we see. And I'm gonna go ahead and show everything again. And oops, I still have my base hair mesh here. I'm gonna go ahead and hide that. All right, so I have, we have to make sure that we hide our hair braid mesh, and yeah, all of our meshes for our hair, make sure you hide it. There's a hair braid mesh and a hair banks mesh. Make sure you hide that one, and make sure they're not renderable. So you could also turn off the disabling renders if you want to. If you're gonna do a render through here and you don't want the meshes to show, just turn off the camera icons here, but I'm not gonna do that until later. And yeah, so let's go ahead and check what we have so far. And as you can see, the skin is no longer showing. If you can see that there's a little purple there going on, so that's basically coming from the light that I have. So my light here is, yeah, I think it's the fill light. Hold on. Oops, still very, very dark. Yeah, so I believe that was the, yeah, that was the light, the rim light. So if I turn off my rim light, you could see that it's just no more illumination on the hair, and you don't see the purple light anymore. So basically, this is how you would do the braids, and I hope that you guys learned a lot from this lesson. Let me turn on my purple light because I do want it to look more like yeah, the purple is more like the witch color, so I like to add it here for my final result later. But yeah, this is how you guys will be able to do custom braids, whether you want to do French braids, box braids, and I think if you guys want to add, of course, you need to take more time on this, which is what I will do later. I will be adding some more hair manually. I'm going to be selecting my bang area and then just add a little bit more hair here to kind of give a nice transition between the bangs and the actual hair and the braid area. So that's it, guys. I hope you all learned from this Victory 3D video.